Hey, gorgeous people, it's Colette, and I'm here today to give you a little mini masterclass on the teenage brain, and more specifically to kind of explore adolescence, because as parents and carers, it can be a little bit challenging. So if we are fortunate to have had our children from when they are teeny tiny little people, we've nurtured them, we have fallen in love at whatever stage, and there have been a lot of moments where they've been adorable. And that's biology, that's nature happening. That's why when little things have got big eyes, and it's just so we fall in love with them. And as mammals, we look after each other. However, then we grow up and we kind of grow a little less cute, but that's okay, because we were cute in the time that we were really needy and really dependent. So nature works wonders, and there's a lot of conversation around early years, and absolutely rightly so, because it's so important. It's really, really crucial. When we lay a strong foundation in the early years, it makes things a lot easier moving forward. It means that you don't have to dig anything up. You don't need to rectify anything. So obviously, the stronger the foundations, the earlier we can make it, the better. However, it doesn't mean to say that it's all plain sailing by any manner of means. And there does seem to be a little bit less conversation around the adolescent years. So this is my intention with this mini masterclass, is to deep dive into that gorgeous stage of being human when we're not that cute anymore, and actually we're quite hard to parent and look after. So by the end of this session, I hope you guys will have a better idea as to what's happening in our gorgeous teens and tweens, our little big people that we live and love, live with and love, and a bit of an insight into how you can best support that young person, as well as how you can best support yourself during this time. Because it is tough, and it's really important to not take it personally, but it's really hard not to take it personally. So that's my intention with this mini masterclass. So let's deep dive. If you do have any questions throughout, then do just drop me a little message, or just comment, and I shall get back to you with whatever I need to get back to you with. Okie doke. So I've got a few props, as I normally do. So I would like to first of all introduce you to Bob. Meet Bob. Hiya, Bob. So Bob is a human. He's not a real human. He's fake. I bought him from Amazon. Just to let you know. Anyway, so when we are born, we're fully formed, and our brains are fully formed. So I want to kind of geek out with you for just a little moment. So while we are ickle and little when we're born, we're fully functioning. So I think our brains are like 3 pounds or something when they're born, and they grow to like 8 pounds. So there's quite a big difference. But the wonderful thing is about our brains is, while they're fully formed, as in it looks like a brain, it's not fully connected until we're around 30. How bananas is that? So when we're looking at our little big people, who are they look like women and men, they look like adults. And, all their body parts are functioning like adults. However, the underneath stuff isn't totally adult-like yet. So it's really, really easy to mistake a little big person or a big little person in front of us and actually think they should be behaving like an adult because they look like one. But underneath, they've still got a lot of development that's happening. So my invitation to you there is just slow down a little bit, and when we catch ourselves treating a big little person like a proper big person, then just remember that I'm not fully formed yet. So there's a bit of a difference between teenage and adolescence, but we kind of cross them over. So being a teenager is 13 to 19, and we made that up. We made that up in the 60s. We kind of branded that stage of being human, a teenager, and it's kind of caught on. But that's not adolescence. Adolescence is the biological stage of maturity. So when we start going into puberty, and that ends when we're a fully functioning adult. Now, that can start anytime from 8, really. So when you're kind of looking at your little big people, and they're not teenagers yet, but they're beginning to kind of act a little bit funny, that's why. It's because they've started that period of adolescence. So it's when I'm working with parents and families, very often they say, oh, but my kids aren't teenagers yet. It doesn't matter. The number, the age that they are doesn't matter. It's the biological stage that matters. It's all about what's happening underneath that really, really matters. So when you're hearing, like, even I say it, the teenage brain, it's not about it being a 13-year-old's brain or a 19-year-old's brain. It's just, we kind of interchange those terms, but it's important to differentiate it to really understand what's beneath that label. I harp on about labels. So yes, so throughout this workshop, really what we are exploring is adolescence, which can start around 8, and with every generalisation, there are people who start adolescence before that, and obviously some young people can start puberty very, very young, in which case, that's a medical condition and you go to doctors and whatever. But in general, when things are working the way they're meant to be working, then it starts around 8, and for women it ends around 25. Again, it can be a little bit earlier, it can be a little bit later, and for men it can be a little bit later. So that's where the age 30 comes into that. So it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. So there we go. What I would like to do is introduce you to an acronym, and it's an acronym that I find really, really useful, and it's a real good umbrella for the whole adolescent stage that we can kind of deep dive off of. Now, this acronym was created by a psychiatrist, neuroscientist dude called Dan Seigel. He's all over YouTube. He's really, really good. So if you're in any way, shape or form interested, then but watch this first, but off you go on YouTube and read his books and stuff. He's got a great book called Brainstorm, and anyway, he's the man I'm talking about that came up with this acronym, and that acronym is called Essence. So here we are here. Let me move it back. So Essence, as you can see, is broke up into 4 sections. So the E in the S is represents emotional spark. The S and the E is social engagement, the N is novelty, and the CE is creative expression. Now, this is the essence of adolescence. Boom, 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 the man is good. And this really represents what it's like to be a big little person. So think about it. We've got emotional spark. So when we are going through adolescence, have you noticed, and my invitation to you is to reflect back to your time when you were going through puberty and you were a teenager. So when you were, in high school, late primary school, think back to the way things were for you. Emotional spark. We feel things so much more intensely when we're going through that stage, which can be a really wonderful thing, because there can be, you know, when something excites us, then it's really exciting. But equally, the downside of that is we can be a little bit moody, and it's here, there, and everywhere, because we're really linked strongly to our emotions. Now, I'm going to bring Bob back. There's a reason for this. So, hiya. So Bob, if you imagine Bob's brain, obviously Bob's brain's in here. So while we've said that we're born with our full brains, but they're developing connections. And if you imagine a connection being like a broadband connection, potentially I need to change this because some people are getting too young to understand what life was like without the internet. But when the internet first came out and it was dial-up and it was really, it was awful. It was really, really slow. And now we've got our ultra-fast, super... So as our brains become more connected, they're more like broadband connections. So in our young people, they are operating mainly from an area of their brain called the amygdala. Now, again, this is complete generalizations. We always use all of our brains, but it's about the kind of thickness of connections and how well connected and how easy it is to access all the different parts of our brain. So I will bring Bob onto my hand. So we have got, if you imagine, get your hand out. I'll put Bob here. Can Bob go there? Can you see Bob if he's there? Woo! Bring your hand out. So if you imagine that here is our brainstem, and our brainstem is here. So that's a bit kind of just at the base. And that's the first bit that is created. So when you're growing in the womb, that's the first bit that comes into being, really. And then the next bit in terms of brain development is our emotional center. So this is like the reptilian brain. So this is brainstem, sorry, is where we, it's all the stuff we don't need to think about. So we don't need to think about breathing. We don't need to think about our heart beating. We don't need to, it runs like our immune system. So all of that juicy stuff that keeps us alive is in our brainstem. The reptilian brain is kind of really how we're beginning to kind of interact with the world. So that's like an emotional centre. As I've said, generalisations. There are lots of different areas that are impacting on our creation of emotions in the moment. So that's our reptilian brain. And the last bit is our prefrontal cortex, and cortex is Latin for bark because it's all kind of wrinkly and stuff. So this bit, while we're born with it, it's not fully connected yet, which means that our young people are really operating from their reptilian brain. So while they've got this, and day by day, moment to moment, is getting increasingly more connected, it's not as connected yet as probably your eyes, which means, bringing it back to the ES, the emotional spark, that our young people are more likely to be experiencing emotion on a far more intense level than we are, because when we feel something, kind of sends a signal to our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive reasoning parts, it's our wisdom, if you like. And we can suss it out and say, right, actually, you know, you've done that before, doll, it's okay. There's no need to get your knickers twisted. And we can remember experiences, everything, you know, when you get to our age, very few things are brand new. We've kind of got a concept of a lot of things. When you're an adolescent, you don't. Most things are brand new to you. And because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully connected, then the messages when they're experiencing something, they don't have this kind of wise old owl kind of saying, you're all right, it's not all that, it's fine. Which is why our teenagers can be quite dramatic creatures because of this. Does that make sense? And I know if every single person that I've certainly met and have lived with and is in my radar, worked with, has had, even if their own children are absolute angels, and if they really are, really, really genuinely, do let me know if they are, because I have got very wonderful, wonderful children, but shish mahal, they can really act up sometimes. So in general, they're wonderful, well-adjusted humans, but they still, you know, kind of go off sometimes. So if you imagine this being going off your head, so you're boiling, pooh, and then it explodes. So here, emotional spark can be a good thing. It can also be a not so good thing. Just like everything, it's all in a balance. So what I would like to do is introduce you to traffic lights, which you're all familiar with. So green for go, amber for better be careful here, and red for you're breaking a law if you go ahead there. It's danger. Something bad could really happen if you keep going here. And in nature, have you noticed that a lot of things are coloured red when it's a warning? So if nature's doing it, then we are part of nature. We really need to listen. So when we're nice and calm, it's green for go, so we can have great conversations. If we are amber, then imagine that our emotional centre, this amygdala, and it's the same for us as it is for our young people, that's kind of burning away there. We're not quite flipping the lid yet. We're not kind of popping our head off, but we're a bit antsy. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's in terms of a negative emotion. It doesn't need to be that I'm frustrated or sad or angry or anything. It can actually be that I'm really excited. I've had some really good news. And if you imagine a snow globe being really, really clear so you can see the picture behind it, that's here where we're green for go and everything's chilled and, you know, you can see clearly, you're feeling calm. Amber is more when it's kind of been shook up a wee bit. So you've not got that clarity. So it can be you're feeling excited and kind of nice stuff. And it can also be that you're kind of feeling frustrated or angry or anything like that. And you've not got that clear picture ahead of you. In which case, when we're having a conversation with that young person, if they're in, or anybody really, if they're in amber, then proceed with caution. Just, you know, be careful, because if you are in amber zone, then you're not really seeing clearly. And if they're in amber zone, then they're not seeing the world clearly either, which means it's not really conducive to having great things happen, is it? But then we'll get red zone when and we're really flipped it and we are so upset. Or equally, I've got tickets for that band I love, oh my goodness, the world is so amazing. So again, it can be good or it can be bad, but the clarity of thinking isn't there. So imagine there, if you are so angry or so excited, you've totally blocked off the pathway to your prefrontal cortex. So the example that I use, if you imagine this being a dog, so this is your guard dog and it's barking and telling you, no, then the wise old owl up here, your prefrontal cortex, your executive reasoning, the dog is barking so loudly, it can't hear the wise old owl saying, it's all right, you've got this. And obviously, in terms of our young people, that wise old owl isn't really an old owl yet, so it's got a bit of a whispery voice. So while this one is like, rah, 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 this one is like, I don't think you should do this. So it's not getting the message across so well. So when we're in red zone and we've totally flipped out, then if we're approaching somebody when we're in red zone, and we've all done it, we've all yelled at people and continued to yell. We've all lost the plot and wah! Do not tell me I'm alone here. And we've expected a good result. And the more that we flip out at that person in front of us, probably they've flipped out too. And has anything good ever happened when both of you are in red zone? Again, let me know if that's true. Sometimes what can happen is in red zone, you can and both of you can kind of vent and get stuff out, and then at a later date or a later time, even if it's like 5 minutes later, whatever, when you're both calmer and you have another conversation, then some good stuff can happen. But does it actually happen when we're both in red zone? And when, especially when we are working and living with our young people, how often do we continue to engage in a conversation when they are in red zone? Because, well, I want to talk about this and now's the time for me, this is a good time for me. But if the message, if the meaning of communication is the message that's received, it's kind of irrelevant. If I'm saying words out loud and you're not understanding it, I'm wasting my time, haven't I? So when, as a parent, carer, youth professional, that we are talking with our young person that we really care about and we want them to hear whatever it is that we're saying because it's important, why do we do it when they're in red zone? When there's lots of things we can do that also involve backing away, and backing away is not failing, it's not giving up, it's a distinct strategy to say, actually, what I want to say to you is so important that it's important that you get into green zone. So I'm going to come back. I'm not giving up in this conversation, but I'm going to come back at a time and a place that's more effective. Make sense? So that's the lowdown with emotional spark. So with our young people in adolescence, ENS, they are more emotional. And that's why when we think about that time in our life, chances are that's where some of your favourite music kind of came from. When you think about maybe a really good summer or the things that you used to be able to do, chances are that they are from your adolescent period. And bearing in mind your adolescent period isn't being a teenager, it is age between 8 and even 30. So that intensity of emotion is when we're younger. Make sense? So then, social engagement. Now, for social engagement, that's when our little people, little person, mama bear. This is actually my childhood pandas. I think they're called Ling Ling and Ching Ching or something awful. So anyway, mama bear, baby bear. But imagine baby bear is now a little bit, probably the same size as mama bear, maybe bigger. But when baby bear is a baby, it's all about this, isn't it? It's all about attachment. And Mama Bear's job and Daddy Bear's job and any bear, I'm all about community parenting. We need to look out for our young people. It's not just the people who live with those young people's job to look after them. It's absolutely not. Teamwork makes the dream work. But anyway, for the sake of this, because I'm a mama bear, I'm going to call this a mama bear. So early years attachment is really important. And when a mama bear, daddy bear, has got the little person, they want to keep them close. They want to keep an eye on them. And that's important because as this little person is off exploring and kind of experimenting and playing with the world and kind of seeing what works and what's poisonous and what's not and all of that stuff, mom and daddy bear here is looking out for this little person, but it's very kind of tight boundaries really to maintain that attachment and make sure that baby bear here is okay. Now, baby bear grows up. Baby bear is fed up of mama bear keeping an eye on me all the time. I can do it myself. I want to do it myself. I want to do this. I want to explore the world and I really don't need you looking out for me all the time. I'm okay. I can do it myself. Does any of this sound familiar? Mama bear here, because mama bear has got a fully connected prefrontal cortex, is very aware of all of the risks out in the world. But because big little bear here doesn't have that, then big little bear thinks everything's really exciting, back to that emotional spark. So mama bear is aware of the risks and mama bear wants to keep an eye on big little bear. This little one here doesn't want that. So this attachment is kind of getting stretched. Now, as this attachment gets stretched and as this big little bear wants to go off and explore, it's very easy for mama bear to take this personally, and daddy bear and every other bear. And it's so important to not. This is nature at work. It is natural for baby bear to turn into a big little bear and to want to find its own tribe and to leave home and to have its own family and explore the world and turn into this wonderful human that it's born to be. And that's been your job. That has been your job, to turn this little thing into a wonderful soul that's got its own gifts to bring to the world. So this little thing is doing what it's born to do. It's wanting to leave the nest. It's wanting to explore. It's just not really so aware of the risks. So our job here is really to encourage that social engagement and to do it safely and not to take it personally. So imagine this attachment, and we're used to that. We're used to the little person who will come in from school and tell us all about their day potentially. We might even get a wee cuddle. And now they don't. And that's kind of tough, isn't it? But this wee one is a happy lamb because it's off and it's doing its stuff. Social engagement is a key part of adolescence, when this little thing wants to go off and find its own friendship groups. It's perfectly natural and perfectly normal. We just need to hold that space for them. So when we take it personally, we think that they don't need us anymore because they're telling us that. They're absolutely saying it, and sometimes with quite a lot of venom that I don't need you, I can do this myself and all of that. But actually they do, and you know they do because they don't have all of that going on yet. But the more that we can give them that independence and kind of create that space to help them develop the connections, and that can be help just asking them questions that helps them consider what the risks are so they can come to their own conclusion. Whereas when we are busy treating them, the way that we did when they were little, when we would do a lot of telling and not a lot of asking, basically because, you know, that was kind of the way we had to get through it. And that's how you get routines sorted, and this is how we do it. But we need to change and we need to evolve. So if we really want them to make the connections sooner rather than later, then if we continue to tell them what to do, then we're not giving them the space to think, which actually means we're delaying their maturity at the end of the day. So while it can be really tough, it's really important for us to realise that what worked here isn't going to work anymore over here. And they are still attached. They do still need us. They just need us in a different way. So they're differently attached. It's not so much now about us guiding them. It's more about us going forward together and exploring the world together. So this big little one can safely share to us what they've found and ask us questions, and we can ask them questions that help them develop their brain fully, which means they are going to take less risks more sooner. Does that make sense? And when I say take less risk, every personality is different. So it might be that you're a particularly risk-averse parent and you've actually got a kind of adventure-seeking child, and that in itself can be a bit stressful just because there's that difference there. And that's when asking questions and helping them really consider consequences can come in quite handy. And equally, it can be that you've got a child who's really risk averse and you're a creature of variety and excitement and all that kind of thing. And again, that kind of difference can lead to some stress and some tension when this one is assuming that this one's in the wrong and this one is assuming that that one's in the wrong. They're not in the wrong, they're just different. Let's ask better questions. So that's social engagement, that natural point of our little people, who are now big people, wanting to fly the nest. And our job kind of changes into encouraging that and not taking it as personally as so often we do. Cool. Next one. Kind of alluded to it here. N for novelty. Novelty is fascinating. Okay, now, have you ever had a young person who you live with, love with, work with, who lies in their bed on the sofa and it takes so much energy to lift them up and actually get them to do anything? Me. So our brains, as you're becoming aware, are changing when we're in adolescence. But here's the fascinating thing. So I don't know how familiar you are with neurochemicals, but they all do different things. And our kind of feel-good neurochemicals are like dopamine, serotonin, a bit of adrenaline, all of that can lead to like, yay! When we're in adolescence, dopamine plummets. So dopamine is our, again, generalizing things. Dopamine is our reward neurochemical. So when we get that like on social media and you get that, oh, so-and-so, seen that, whatever, that's when they're getting a dopamine kick. When you eat that chocolate bar, that's when a dopamine kick comes in. So it's a bit of a reward. So you do something and you get a neurochemical reward, which gives you that, that's a nice feeling. In our adolescence, they need to do more to get the same dose of dopamine as we do. So what's the implication for that? So when we're asking them to do stuff, they actually need more to get them going than we do. So we're actually judging them by our own MO. That's why they get bored so much. Oh, this is boring. Because it's not released enough dopamine to get them into that, oh, alert and oh, interested state. It's not personal, and again, it's not accepting poor behaviour. It's not letting them off with stuff. It's understanding that actually, biologically, they need novelty, actually need novelty. Adolescence is a whole period of a decade, effectively, where their job is to explore. Their job is to adventure. Their job is to thrill seek. And once they've done that, then they settle into adulthood. And that's why young people are so creative. I'm going to move on to that in the next one, because that's what they do. They've not experienced the world before, so they've got fresh eyes, but also they want to experience stuff that gives them that feel good. And to do that, it just takes more than what it does for us. So when we're, again, back to, it's not letting them off with stuff, it's just understanding that actually we need to make this exciting for them to engage in it. So for example, I'll give a purely personal example, tidying up. So when I give my kids jobs to do, responsibilities of, could you do this? So for example, for a while, my son's responsibility was to take the bins out on bin night. When I've asked him to, like, do the dishes and tidy up the kitchen, that kind of thing. That it's a bit like, it's really frustrating asking them to do it because they don't want to do it. However, when we create it as a kind of team activity, like, yay, right, okay, it's tidy up time, let's do it, all hands on deck, let's get the kitchen done, let's, whatever, we've got half an hour, let's see what we can blast through, and we turn it into an exciting kind of job, then they do all get involved. So it's not about saying, actually, it's so much hard work that it's not worth me going through that to get them to help out in the house. It's actually, well, how can I do that that's going to give them that dopamine kick that means that they're going to continue doing it and actually be engaged in it. Again, it's back to that whole communication. When we take communication as the meaning that's received rather than just the words that we say, it brings us back to, it gives us the responsibility. So we place ourselves back in cause. So I am the cause of things. Life is happening by me, not to me. So I've got a choice. I can either just talk to a brick wall, or I can understand that that's actually what's happening. So how can we shake it up to make things a little bit more exciting for them, which means life is a lot easier for us. There's so many parents that I've worked with and young people that I've worked with who their parents don't let them do anything in the house because from the parents' perspective, it's too much like hard work. And from a young person's perspective, they're de-skilled. They're de-skilled, and when they turn into an adult and they move into their own house, they don't actually know how to make things work. They don't know how to manage things because they haven't been given the opportunity to learn because they didn't do it right. So that's kind of down to us to kind of shake things up and come back to the objective. What are we doing? We're raising wonderful humans to be wonderful, independent, kind and awesome humans. And to do that, we kind of need to help them in whatever way we can rather than just doing it my way or the highway. So that's novelty. Deeply fascinating, isn't it? So thankfully we kind of create dopamine a wee bit easier than that now. A little Taz bar is enough for me. I get high on chocolate very, very easily. Last one, creative expression. So just alluded to that there. So we are, when we're in our adolescence, the world is brand new. It's so exciting. And because they have got a completely fresh perspective, because they haven't been here before, they've got fresh eyes and they see things differently. And when we combine all of that, so they're more, they're going to experience emotions more intensely, so they're going to feel that excitement on a far intenser level than potentially you and I. And they're just naturally adventure seeking. What can we do? How does this work? It tends to be that young people are kind of solution focused. Just, let's come up with new stuff. Which when we look at innovators, and especially now that technology is really facilitating young people coming into their own, because as soon as they've got an idea, technology really helps them kind of turn it into reality. But creative expression and thinking freshly is a strength of young people. Yet so often we don't really give them the credit for that. So when we are stuck, then ask a young person. And if you are fortunate enough to be living with a young person, then pass it over to them. Say, what's the crack here? And let them come into their own, let them express it. And the more that we create that space to ask them really good questions that have them thinking, then the more connections they make in their brain. Because to make those connections, it's just a thought and a thought and a thought. And the more we think and the more we explore, then the stronger those connections become. So that's adolescence, the essence of adolescence. So the E and the S is emotional spark, the S and the E is social engagement, the N is novelty, and the CE is creative expression. So I hope that you've got a bit of a sense now as to what's going on with your gorgeous little big person that you have got in your life. And do let me know any thoughts that you have around that. With everything, it's all about the conversation. The easiest way to get what we want is to ask. And when we're in that wonderful role of kind of parenting and looking after and supporting our young people, it's really important for us to do all we can for us to stay in green zone. And that can be tough. That can be really, really tough, especially when it tends to be that as an adolescent, they're operating in amber a lot of the time. So that can be tough, and that can kind of trigger things in us that can result in us living there or there. But for us to really kind of show up as the best human for them and for everybody else in our life, this is not just totally youth-centric, it's human-centric. When we're in green zone more often, and the more we look after ourselves and the more we understand how our brain works, then that's a lot easier to stay there. Now, one last thing that's really, really important is around our kind of thought-feeling connection. Just when I was saying there around self-care, and I was talking to you about neurochemicals and stuff, geeky stuff, it's very easy for us to talk about feelings and emotional states as if they're a solid thing, and they're really hard to get out of. But my invitation to you is to explore your emotions yourself. Emotions are, they're created in every single moment. So it's not like they exist inside of us and things trigger them, even though, you know, that's just, we've got into a language habit of saying that. They're experienced and created every single nanosecond of our experience, really. So the more that you watch me, you've got different kind of emotions being created, and you feel that, the consequence of that. Now, what's really, really interesting is that can result in an upward spiral. So if we are creating kind of feel-good feelings, so if we're creating our happiness and our joy and our excitement and whatever, that can create that upward spiral. And if we are thinking, oh my goodness, this is impossible, this is going to be really tough, this is a nightmare, I can't cope, we're kind of creating a downward spiral. The thought-feeling cycle is pure and simply that we have a thought or a feeling, and that creates a kind of cycle where we trigger our neurochemicals, so we get a physiological reaction. So when you are excited, for example, then potentially your heart is going to start racing a wee bit more. It could be that you breathe a little bit more shallow and you're from here rather than from down here. So the thoughts and feelings that we have kind of take our bodies to a different place. But what's wonderful is once we take our mind away from what's triggering that or what's creating that thought feeling cycle and create another thought feeling cycle, the neurochemicals that we've triggered and created in our body to kind of do all of this groovy stuff will go away within 5 minutes. Which means when you have, and you might have them, your young people might have them, when you have a bit of anxiety, you might have a panic attack or something like that, it will dissipate as long as you do not engage with that thought feeling cycle. The most important thing that you can do is just let it go. Look elsewhere, find something, a distraction. This is where teamwork makes the dream work. So when we notice that each other is kind of getting into that kind of amber red zone, then we can help each other come out of it by kind of a bit of a distraction. And the quicker we kind of look away, then there's less of an impact in our body to recover from. Does that make sense? So if you imagine a castle being under attack, so if you imagine those neurochemicals kind of as arrows kind of shooting towards that castle, if they're shooting towards that castle just for a few seconds, then it's not going to make really any impact on that castle, is it? However, if the arrows are constantly, shooting, and then they get the cannonballs out, there's all of this coming, and it's a real sustained attack, then it will make an impact on the structure of that castle, which means it's going to take a little bit longer to repair. And that's ultimately what's happening in our body. So the quicker we can disengage from that thought feeling cycle, then the less we actually have to repair, which means the quicker we'll return to green zone. When we've had a sustained attack, it might be that, for example, your young person is being bullied. That can be a sustained attack, because how they are perceiving that is engaging in a thought feeling cycle, which is releasing more of the kind of adrenaline and cortisol and the stuff that kind of, it's that toxic stress kind of experience. So when they're in a situation that's how they're experiencing their life, and it doesn't have to be a thing, it's how they're experiencing it. So it may not be that I actually think they are getting bullied, but if they feel that they are, that's all that matters, because it's the feeling of it that's releasing all of this chemical reaction, which is creating this physiological response in their body. So the sooner we can become aware of that in ourselves, and the sooner we can become aware of that in the young people we love and the humans we love generally, then the easier it will be to distract that and disengage from that thought feeling cycle. When we have gone to the dark place, and we've all gone to the dark place, we have all gone there, and we have lived there for varying periods of time. At that point, it might be that I can't help myself get out of that because I'm so deep in there. It's kind of like the lights have gone off, in which case it's important for the people around us to help turn the lights back on and to help distract them and kind of encourage them to understand what's happening, and that they're living in the experience of all of these chemicals going off in their body. They're not feeling that way because of what's out there. They're feeling that way because they're living in the consequence of having their castle shot down, and they're needing a bit of time to recover. So knowing that means that they might be in red zone. So slowly but surely we can do what we can, and we can talk kindly to them, and we can create that space, and we can keep, gently kind of helping them understand how they can repair their castle, and slowly but surely they'll come back down. But the quicker we get them out of there, or we help them get out of that, because we can't actually do anything other than help them do that themselves, then the quicker that is, then the less they've got to repair. So that's us. Welcome to Adolescence. Do let me know any questions that you have, and I shall get back to you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.